Man, we joke all the time about Jabba, just Auburn being Auburn. We saw that yesterday.
Well, Zach, I actually just finished crushing some chicken farm, and I am freaking ready to rock and roll.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Happy Ferg Friday to all those who celebrate. Justin Ferguson with the Auburn Observer joining us today. And J. Ferg, it wouldn't be Auburn's kickoff to fall camp without just some crazy story happening, right? I mean, I guess we should have seen this coming.
Well, I mean, okay, a little bit, but also like stuff like this hasn't happened in a while around here.
That's true.
I mean, it is very minor, right? You know, when you talk about like when you hear like, a player got arrested, it can be really rough.
Yeah,
very minor situation here. But yeah, I mean, like I feel like this is like early 2010s kind of style Auburn stuff happening.
Yeah, it's kind of what it felt like. So if you're living under a rock, Auburn quarterback TJ Finley, I'm using air quotes here for folks that are just listening on audio, got arrested and everything's been taken care of. Really weird story where like he didn't know he was being pursued and got a ticket, but like I guess didn't realize it and then didn't pay it on time. And so then once he became aware of it, he handled it the correct way, turned himself in, paid what he needed to pay, and it's behind us now. But a distraction nonetheless. You hate it for TJ because he had that really cool news not too long ago about the whole, Amazon NIL deal. And like, I hope it doesn't impact that at all, but I don't know. Like it seems like it's behind us. It seems like, Bryan Harsin said as much. Does this mean anything, Justin?
I don't think so. I think it's a maybe a little embarrassing for TJ Finley and his family to kind of have to go through. But yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like, a weird kind of like, you hesitate to even call it like this big mistake or anything like that. But yeah, it was just something that happened and you got to take care of it and put it behind you. But like the way it gets, because of all the legal stuff around it, it's like when you see arrest for evading the police, is like, whoa, what?
The headline was, the headline wasn't wrong. That's what it was.
But more details had to come out over the day.
Yeah, so like nobody was clickbaiting. It wasn't incorrectly reported or anything. It's just it was a really unfortunate situation for TJ Finley. When I saw the headline, my heart sank. I was just like, no, come on, TJ. You got a chance to go back and fight for the job. And you have the Amazon thing with NIL and all that. It's like, come on. But it seems like it's going to be okay.
You were. I think you were about to say Bryan Harsin asked about it. Hey, he's going to be out of practice. They're aware of it. I think it'll just be one of those things you just deal with. But if he's going to be out of practice, the funny story is, so Thursday they had media availability, and we talked about the coordinators and Harsin, which we'll obviously talk about here in a moment. But as I'm walking into the complex, is the moment TJ Finley got to the complex.
Oh, yeah?
And so it was just like one of those things where it was like, oh, he's not in trouble. He's right here. Like, it was one of those things where you were like, okay, all right. So, and then when Harsin just said, yeah, he's going to be practicing, it's like, yeah, we're done here. Like, it's again, I'm sure kind of the negative public. It feels like Finley is like trying to combat some of that negative publicity, which I get, which I understand. But it's just like, yeah, this thing will die. This will, the news cycle about it like lasted like 45 minutes. And so, people will poke fun at it and be like, oh, it's Auburn or nah, it's just, something minor that happens. And I think everybody will move on from it.
Right. Yeah. Everybody put out their story about the initial news, and then everybody put out the story of his lawyer's statement and like, oh, okay. Yeah. It was just a traffic
thing. And then Auburn police released a thing of like their version of the events. And it's like, yeah, I mean, it's just, the timeline, the way it kind of sounded to me is like, hey, he was driving through without a helmet on,
right?
On the moped. Cop turned his lights on. He kept going. There seems to be a situation where he went back to get it or something like that. So that's where the second count comes in. And it's like, hey, man, you got a warrant out because, you went away from a cop that was trying to pull you over, for lack of a better phrase. And it's like, okay, well, now go take care of it. And, it seemed to be pretty easy.
Yeah, had several people DM me and DM the show pages on social and all that, saying like, oh, well, that, the quarterback battle is decided. I do not think that is true. I don't think it's true. I don't think it's any different than it was 24 hours ago. Now I'm kind of in the camp that like, I don't know how much of a quarterback battle there actually is this fall. I'm still I was in that camp before. I'm still in that camp now, but TJ's shot of winning the job did not increase or decrease. I don't think because of all of this.
If TJ Finley doesn't win the starting quarterback job, I don't think this situation is going to have anything to do with it. I think it's the best way to sum all of it up.
Agreed. Now, I do think it answers the question of, which I've never asked myself this. Maybe you have, Jay Ferg, but could TJ Finley fit on a moped because he's massive? The answer is yes.
I'll tell you, the scooters that Auburn athletes move, travel around in. I mean, I've seen some big old dudes on them. The basketball team uses them all the time, and and those things can fly. So I can understand where the helmet's kind of one of those things where, and again, it's probably more of a motorbike, moped than like those. But those little electric scooters they wheel around on campus, those things can fly too. So I'm sure whatever the vehicle was, you can make some pretty good speed on it. Yeah,
they're carrying a lot of man with that too. So props to TJ for handling it the right way and didn't go to social media to like instantly try to defend himself or anything like that. Like, props to him. I think he handled it the right way, the way everything happened. And a lot of Auburn fans said some really nasty stuff to him. So I hope, I hope they rethink that.
Hopefully. I mean, you hope all that, but it's just a minor thing. One of those kind of things like you don't want to. I don't even know if I necessarily want to call it like a college kid kind of thing, or it's just like it's just their side kind of paints it as like it was a misunderstanding. The police have been like, hey, we got to take care of this, and it's like, okay, all right.
Yeah, it's done.
In the grand scheme of things, it's traffic violations. And it's like, I think all of us have dealt with that in the past. We just weren't quarterbacks at a major university.
Sure. All right, we're gonna put that behind us. That probably won't ever be brought up on the show again. But there we go. That was a story, so we needed to react to it. But also Bryan Harsin and then the Kiesau and Schmetting. Everybody spoke to the media yesterday. Some big picture takeaways coming up in just a moment. And a player that kept being brought up, and Justin Ferguson has written about this player a lot. We'll tell you who that is in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. But first, got to tell you about our friends at betonline.net. They're the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs and getting involved in the action. You can find all of your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, games, and more. The preseason for the NFL started last night. Yes, you can gamble and get in on the action for preseason. Do it. And the best place to do it is at BetOnline. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Jay Ferg. So Donovan Kaufman kept being, he was brought up by pretty much everybody yesterday, and coaching just kind of went out of their way to bring him up, talking about how he has that professional approach to the game. You wrote about him a few weeks ago at the Auburn Observer in a newsletter. It just kind of confirmed everything you've been saying about this guy.
Yeah, this is going to be one of your key players this year, a defensive back. They look at him as a leader, kind of the quarterback of the defense on that backside. I think he's going to play a ton of nickel, which is very helpful because that'll keep Nehemiah Pritchett mostly on the outside, which I think is the best case scenario for all parties. You do wonder kind of about the depth at nickel, but that safety in certain situations. He's going to be your kind of key man back there. I know guys like Smoke Monday and Darius Knight and have more snaps. Zion Puckett also had more snaps than him last season. This dude's going to be one of the key guys. They look at him as, like I said, they look at him as a leader, and it'll be interesting. His versatility and his experience, I think, will go a long way for this defense. Right.
So it's interesting if he is going to be primarily at nickel, which is, I think, expected. I don't think it's a shock, but it is interesting what it does to the cornerback rotation. We assume Nehemiah Pritchett is going to get a ton of snaps. Heard nothing but good things about DJ James. I think you're high on Jalen Simpson as well. I certainly am. That battle becomes more interesting to me if you do that. And then also the safety situation, like that's not really decided yet either. So The fact that he's a nickel, that's kind of the no man's land, a guy that could be you could put a corner or a safety there. That just makes those battles more interesting over the next few weeks.
Yeah, and I would imagine that they will still use corners at nickel. Like, Jeff Schmedding mentioned J.D. Rhym as a guy that could play there. He mentioned Pritchett again. He mentioned like guys that corners that kick inside there. But yeah, it's that safety spot with Puckett that'll be very interesting to me to see. Craig McDonald makes a ton of sense there. Obviously, as Iowa State guy that came in, played a ton last season for Iowa State in a number of different positions. I think he's very similar. He's bigger. He's definitely bigger. I think he's very similar versatility-wise to Donovan Kaufman. If you go back and watch him at Iowa State, played a lot in the slot, played box safety, played free safety. So he's kind of a plug-him-anywhere kind of guy. And then also you got the number one JUCO safety in the country this past year, Marquise Gilbert, who was through spring ball. And then, I would be surprised if either of these guys start. So keep that in mind. But, stranger things have happened. The good springs for Caden Bridges and Caleb Wooden. Like, how did they build off of them in fall camp? And are those guys that you can count on this year? That'd be very interesting to see. I like Caden Bridges a lot. I like Caleb Wooden as well. But the thing with Caden Bridges is I'm going to say this and people are going to be like, what? He strikes me a lot like Seth Williams. And what I mean by that is this is a dude who was a multi-sport athlete in high school. He was really good at baseball as football. You get that freshman year, you kind of get, used to college football. Usually for those guys, those later bloomers, those guys who spend a lot of time playing a lot of different sports, that second year when you are homed in on just one sport and one event and, one position, basically, you can see them shoot up. We saw that in Seth Williams' sophomore year. There's been countless examples of that throughout the years at Auburn. Caden Bridges might not be a guy who starts because of that, but he's huge, and I really like the development potential he's got.
No, that's interesting. That's an interesting comparison there. When they said J.D. Rhym, did that surprise you at all? When's the last time we've seen – it didn't surprise you. Nope. When's the last time we've seen a freshman be productive at the nickel spot?
Whew, man.
It's such a hard position to play.
Ladarius Tennyson? Got in there at nickel. I'm trying to remember if
that was only like when Tut got hurt, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if Tut was a freshman contributor at nickel as well. Yeah,
wasn't Tut an outside guy first, and then they moved him inside?
They moved guys around. I don't know. Because like when you think of nickel at Auburn, it's like guys that they moved into there at time. Rudy Ford, obviously running back before he became a nickel. Right. But like. They like Rhym a lot, and they should. He was a really good prospect, coming from Valdosta, great football pedigree coming in. He got that spring ball to kind of get used to everything. Physical, very physical type of guy who's known for his coverage ability. But I go back into spring ball. There were defensive linemen in spring ball that were like, yeah, this dude stuck somebody on a goal line stand, and we were like, whoa. For a freshman to do something like that. So, yeah, man, probably not a starter there. If he is a starter there and he can contribute, good gracious, you'll love that. You'll take that. But somebody can get some snaps there. Yeah, especially with the way Auburn's schedule is set up where you can ease guys into it with the way everything is kind of laid out.
Okay, explain what happened to me with the Jeremiah Wright situation.
Okay.
Has he always been on defense since he moved back? Was that an error, or was he actually on O-line, then moved back to D-line again?
So he is listed on the official roster as offensive line. That is not correct. That will be changed probably here in the near future. Yeah, he's back on defense. Now, he was on offense in the spring. Then in the summer, had conversations. Kind of a similar situation to the JJ Pegues thing from a couple years back, where it's like you have that conversation. I guess last year with Pegues, you have that conversation with him, and it's like, hey, man, we both kind of think your future might be better. Both sides kind of felt like the future was better for him at defensive tackle than offensive tackle. Interesting. It's an interesting move. Wright played a little more guard than tackle on offense, so maybe the future. It was kind of a little bit more settled there than it is on that, on the outside. But yeah, defensive line, huge guy. Obviously, was a guy that a lot of people liked on defense before he tore his ACL last year. So yeah, Jeremiah Wright will be a defensive lineman, and according to Jeff Schmedding, is like, yeah, he's going to be in the middle for us. I would expect him to be kind of one of those guys they look at nose because he is just gigantic for his age.
Yeah. That defensive line room is just so fun to talk about. I mean, you can you could list out 2.5 like starting units where you're like, yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. So this is how deep they are. So, and then the offensive line situation.
Yeah.
And when Bryan Harsin was asked about that, he was pretty, he defended those guys, talked about how, like, you know, they really, they really kind of beefed up, and, you know, they did get pushed around a little bit, and, you know, he wants folks, you know, he wants to be the team that's pushing the other team around. So I guess he did kind of call him out to an extent there, but
he said we've got guys, like, I like our dudes. I think there were times last season where they looked good. It's just we got to be a whole lot more consistent, and we got to be a lot more physical.
Yeah,
sounded like Jeff Pittman, his pet project this summer was like, all right, you got to get it, and it makes sense. This was something that actually one of my readers brought attention to me a couple of weeks ago, and I hadn't thought about it. And to hear Harsin talk about it today made a lot of sense. It's really kind of clicked. It was like, you got to keep in mind, when Gus Malzahn was your head coach, your offensive line was not necessarily big. Like, they were big dudes, but like they weren't built to be like the biggest power based guys in the world, because you had to run a no huddle system. You had to get those guys moving. Now, if you're going to huddle and play a little bit more pro style, it's time to beat these guys back up again. And that is kind of the way they have gone about it. They got to be more physical. They got to be more consistent. Yeah, I mean, Harsin, yes, defended the guys, but then also was just like, we just got to figure out which five can play together consistently, because what we have done to this point is like not good enough. Yeah. And that's a, you know, every Auburn fan, you know, on the planet was like, like, you know, they'll say the same thing.
That's true. That is true. The first name he brought up was Brandon Council.
And the second name is the most interesting one to me.
Yeah, a guy that I didn't think would be a starter this year, but Kam Stutts, man, everybody you talk to. The
summer of Kam Stutts.
Everybody
summer of Kam Stutts.
Yeah, Kam Stutts. So that's interesting. And then I think the third one he mentioned was Keandre Jones, which is not surprising at all. So
it's your best offensive lineman.
And all three of those guys start. I assume if you made all three of those guys start with Brahms,
Council's probably going to tackle.
Right tackle, probably, right? Is Zaire at left? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I mean, and that if Stutts is a starter, the whole thing can change. Like, I mean, I'm 100% believe, like, if Stutts is one of your best five, I think you have Jones locked in at right guard probably, and then everything else could be moved around, right? And because then at that point you were dealing with guys. I mean, you just want consistency. You want guys that can kind of.
Is Council guaranteed a starting spot? Do you think?
I don't think anybody's guaranteed a starting spot. I don't think anybody is guaranteed. I think we have our guys that are kind of.
You don't mean that. Nick Brahms is, right? Is there any way Nick Brahms doesn't start?
I would be surprised, right?
Yeah,
I would be surprised.
Him and I think him and Keandre, like
they kind of say,
starters.
Yeah, but competition pretty much everywhere.
Yeah,
is what Bryan Harsin says. Like, I honestly think, like, when you have 7 or 8 guys, it's like, all right, let's find the best 5, and then we'll deal with it there. Brahms makes sense because he has a ton of experience at center, right? Keandre Jones, again, like, I think is right. So that's probably your 2. But yeah, I'm not, again, nothing against Council, nothing against Treisel, not even anything against Brahms. But it's a comment that I heard earlier today that kind of makes sense when it comes to Keandre Jones and Kam Stutts. Is like, okay, those 3 guys I just mentioned, 6-year guys coming back, you would expect them to be starters. They all have pretty rough injury histories, right? And the thing that Stutts and Jones have is that they've had clean bills of health in their careers. And like, that could be an advantage. That could be, I'm not saying this is what's going to win them the job.
Yeah.
But when you hear about those guys kind of standing out, it's like, yeah, okay. Like, yeah, that makes sense. These other guys have dealt with devastating knee injuries. And like, those aren't always the easiest things in the world to come back from. You know, Austin Troxell and Nick Brahms were really good high school offensive linemen. They've had moments at Auburn where they've been really good offensive linemen, but it's, you know, there's been a lot. Council the same way. It's just the injuries. Like, you've got to wonder if things start to pile up a little bit. But so when all that kind of comes in, a guy like Stutts, who has waited his time, right, and he has spent 4 years learning behind these guys. Yeah, maybe a little bit fresher legs might be able to turn it loose a little bit in camp.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. I think it's
very interesting.
I said this earlier in the week. We did a best case scenario type thing for every position group. And for the offensive line, I said I wanted to see a bunch of different types of looks early in fall camp because they need to try as many different things as possible. It seems like that may be happening.
And I'll say this also. With Kam Stutts, it might be a situation where, no, the usual suspects do start. You have, say Zaire, Council, Brahms, Jones, and Troxel from left to right this season. Well, okay. You still need Stutts, right? Because what happens when somebody goes down? You got to have 6, 7, and 8 ready to roll. And if he's kind of emerged as a guy that's like, well, he's not a starter because you can only start 5, but he's starter quality, it's going to be big because as we've seen, you're going to have a year, or you're going to have times during the year where guys get hurt on the offensive line. It's just the most brutal position in the sport.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, Keandre Jones was the only offensive lineman for Auburn last season that started every game. That, this position chews you up. And so you need guys like Stutts ready. You need guys like Alec Jackson, and you need guys like, I think I'm blanking on it, Brandon Coffey. You need guys like that who are a little bit older, to be ready. And then if any of the younger guys can kind of step up with them, you feel better about the situation.
Yeah, like Garner Langlow or something like that.
Right? Oh, yeah. Tate Johnson, Colby Smith, guys like that. Yeah, for sure.
Yep. No question about it. All right. We got some clarity on how a certain player will be used in 2022. There were questions on. And also, Coach Kiesau labeled one guy as potentially the most improved player in the entire offense. We will talk about that in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Want to encourage folks to check out the Locked On Auburn Discord. It is free to join. All you have to do is click the link in the episode description down below, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast app. Justin Ferguson, before we move on to our final topics of the day, How can people sign up for the Auburn Observer?
Well, listen, it's the best time ever, literally, to sign up for the Observer. I mean, we're going to have, by the time you're listening to this, we're listening to this on Friday morning, we're at practice observations Friday afternoon, Saturday afternoon. There's a brand new podcast you can listen to. We've got a brand new podcast with our buddies, Pablo Escobar on Twitter and Dave McKinney. They're going to be doing like a fan kind of focused podcast with Painter. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. We've got basketball on Sunday. We've got basketball on Monday. There's going to be a ton of observations, a ton of newsletters, a ton of podcasts. Here's where it gets interesting for you guys. If you've never subscribed to the Observer before, if you want to be a first-time subscriber, throughout fall camp, from now until week 1 of the college football season, you will get your first year of the Observer for just $45 a year. $45, wow. Not the $60. We're doing 25% off. It's the lowest deal we've ever offered. So $45 for your whole first year if you sign up anytime really between now and week 1. So this is the perfect time to do it. There's going to be a lot of stuff, a lot of podcasts, a lot of newsletters. We're going to be cranking out a ton of stuff between basketball and football. So this is a great time to get on board. AuburnObserver.com. Sign up. You don't need a link. You don't need a code. You don't need anything like that. Just whenever you try to subscribe, that $45 a year offer will be available to you.
Yeah, that's almost worth it just for fall camp, if I'm being honest with you.
There's going to be a ton of stuff. And then basketball, I had all the observations from the first game. I'm planning on doing the same thing for game 2 and game 3.
Yep. So be sure to check that out, AuburnObserver.com. It's that easy, folks. All right. Joko Willis. We got it confirmed. He's kind of doing that hybrid role thing. We speculated because of that one picture where the edge guys were with Coach Rock. But yeah, so he will be playing that hybrid role. So that is correct. Do you envision that being? Do you envision him spending more time there this season than at linebacker? Yeah, same. Yeah.
He has kind of been the blitz specialist. And so it makes a ton of sense to put him out there like that. And it's like, hey man, if we need you to throw out there a few snaps and play edge rusher and just go pin your ears back and go after the quarterback, he is perfect for that role.
I think so too.
You get him, you have Marcus Bragg in now, and you're developing, of course, Dylan Brooks to be a guy who can contribute this year. It's not the most secure situation in the world, obviously, at edge. But if those guys stay healthy, you feel a lot better about that group now, especially if Joko can give you something.
Yeah, I like Joko as the 4th edge guy. I'm cool with that. I think that's fine.
Yeah, and I think his skill set is made for it. Might not be body wise the typical edge rusher. But we've seen really good edge rushers or guys really good blitzers, really good sack guys without being big dudes. I mean, there was I always go back to the one guy I always go back to when I talk about like little guys who can get after the quarterback. I always go back to Derwin James's career at Florida State. And kind of how they used him early on. Because it was just like, we will put you anywhere, brother. Just go get somebody. So I think Joko's got some of that. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So you can get little guys.
About, the value of a roster spot, though, right? Jay Ferg. I mean, he may be the 4th edge guy. He may be the 4th or 5th linebacker. and he's a pretty good special teams player. Like that's
a great special teams player. Yeah.
You don't get a lot of like recognition, but like the coaching staff probably loves Joko Willis because he makes the team better.
Yeah, and I think that linebacker spot's going to be really interesting. Obviously, Owen's your guy. He's the alpha there at the position. Cam Riley and Wesley Steiner are like this when it comes to what people are talking about him this offseason. Hearing a little bit more, about some other guys kind of making that step up at linebacker. Eugene Asante. You got the Eugene Asante thing. Also, Harsin brought it up, missed good stretches of the spring.
Yeah.
With his father passing away.
I had no idea from that. That's terrible.
I had no idea. I don't think anybody really did. But they seem pretty happy with the progress he's made over the summer. Desmond Tisdale's getting a little bit more buzz about him now. And then you've got guys like a guy like Robert Woodyard, who is, coming in. It's like, yeah, it might be hard to play year one as an inside linebacker in the SEC, but could you find a role? Yeah, why not? You were one of the best players. You were the best player Auburn signed in this class, and Alabama wanted you. So you got talent, kid.
Yep, no question about it. All right, and then the last thing, Coach Kiesau, when talking about Tavares Dawson, he said he might be the most improved young player in the entire offense. We saw him, and I think I mentioned this to you a few weeks ago. Like if you knew nothing about Auburn football and watched Auburn's A-Day game from this year, I think you would walk away from that being like, okay, Tavares Dawson's the number one receiver in the offense. That's just what it looked like. How much does that matter? I don't know. It's A-Day, but it sounds like there's some real interest and some real excitement around him.
Yeah, no, he is the official Auburn Observer breakout pick of the year on the offensive side of the ball. I'm putting my reputation on his shoulders. It's great. It worked in the past for Bowie Willow. Didn't work so great with Matthew Hill, but So Tavares,
I forgot all about Matthew Hill. I forgot about him as a human.
Tavares Dawson, don't let me down. He's so fast, and he is got really good hands. He's just a smooth player. It's just, again, a little different, but it's like when you get those wide receivers that were like in high school, it's like, oh, you were the best guy on our team. You're going to do everything for us. And it's like, all right, now we need to make you into a wide receiver. I feel you're just going to be the best guy to give him that kind of training and that kind of guidance. I'm expecting big things out of him.
Yeah.
You've got Shed. You've got Malcolm Johnson Jr.'s got a lot of love coming into the year. Obviously, Javarius Johnson, Coy Moore, those guys. But big things, I think, it could be on the way for Tavares Dawson. And as Kiesau said, dude thought he was going to play earlier in the year. I know there was some COVID and some issues there. Mid-year kind of hit that slump, and it just kind of feeling down. And things weren't going as expected. And then a light kind of switched on for him, and they say this offseason has been huge for him. I think him and Lane and King are going to be guys that people are going to get really excited about this year.
And he was a fall fling last year. I mean, everybody throughout fall was really impressed with him. And
from what I've heard, it's just you had to kind of go into isolation with all the COVID protocol and stuff like that, and it just kind of held him back. Yeah, no, that's going to be a fun receiver room.
Yeah, I think so too. Jay Ferg, one more time quickly, how can people check everything out?
Yeah, AuburnObserver.com. Click around there. Listen to our podcast. We got free ones. We got premium ones. You can read previews of all the newsletters on the site. And if you sign up, like I said, first year, $45, lowest price we've ever done. You can get that deal between now and the end of fall camp to get you ready for the start of the season.
Yep, worth every penny, folks. Be sure to check that out. AuburnObserver.com. Hey, we may do another show on Saturday to talk about Friday's practice, maybe even Saturday's practice. It depends what I'm going out of town later this week. But yeah, be on the lookout for extra shows coming up on both on YouTube and on audio. But yeah, follow all of my written work at auburndaily.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at ZBlackerby. We will see you when we see you right here on Locked On Auburn.